Awesome. All right, welcome everyone. Where we're picking up today is in Bill's story, and we're right in the middle of page 2. And because I'm known for landing the plane at really logical places, we're in the middle of the second paragraph because I do good with time. Woo! And so where we're picking up, it's a couple lines down. We wrapped up with Bill's metaphor for his drinking and his speculating, his work on Wall Street. He described it as an alloy. And an alloy is a mixture of two metals. And what he's doing is he's combining his work on Wall Street with alcohol. And what he's doing is he's creating a weapon that he is going to use to hack, to slash, to cut his way through life to prove that he is important. Now, last week we read about Bill Wilson's experience with the boomerang as a little boy. And I used the analogy of Xena, the warrior princess, where she would throw her throwing weapon, I don't remember what it's called, and it would go choo choo choo, and it would like hit the bad guys and be like and then it would come back to her and she would go wham, and she would catch it. But Bill Wilson, he's not having a Xena the warrior princess moment, unfortunately. You see that throwing, Rob's got a picture of the boomerangs in the chat. That throwing weapon is going to turn on him and it's going to tear him apart. So the same thing, this work on Wall Street and his drinking that is giving him a sense of relief and ease and comfort, it's going to turn on him and tear him apart. And right now we're seeing where alcohol is working, where alcohol is a solution. It goes on to say, living modestly, my wife and I saved $1,000. It went into certain securities, then cheap and rather unpopular. You know that stock market advice where you buy low, sell high. That's what he's doing. I rightly imagined that they would someday have a great rise. So he had the sense that if he invested in these things, they were going to make him some money. And he was right. I failed to persuade my broker friends to send me out looking over factories and managements. But my wife and I decided to go anyway. I had developed a theory that most people lost money in the stocks through ignorance of markets. Now, so what Bill Wilson was doing. Last week at the top of page 2, I explained what it means to be an investigator for a surety company. I'm going to give that definition of that job again, just to help this all come together and make sense. So a surety company is a company that sells or gives out loans to other businesses. And what an investigator would do is an investigator would go and literally investigate these companies to see if they would be a good investment. Then Bill Wilson, hey, are they paying back their other loans? Hey, are they actually making sales? That's what Bill Wilson would do. Now, Bill Wilson, the technical term is jazzercised. He gets jazzercised. I'm just kidding. All about Wall Street. He's like, woo, this is exciting. I love it. Money, 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 business, business, business. I'm here for this. And he was watching these men basically gambling on the stock market. He's like, wait a minute, you guys are just gambling. That's the ignorance of markets. They're putting money over here and over there, but they don't know what's going on. And he had this idea. His idea was, why don't I investigate the companies that we want to invest in, just like I did for this surety company? And that was his idea. Now, that was a revolutionary idea. Spoilers, but we're gonna see that happening. And when he says, so that's what it means, where he's like, I developed the theory that most people lost money in stocks through ignorance of markets, so most people didn't even know what they were putting their money into. But then it says, I discovered many more reasons later on. And if you're wondering, girl, what sort of thematic device is that? That is foreshadowing. It's foreshadowing about a page or so when things are going to get real for Bill. So, woo! Theme, literature, plot. I'm like, I don't know who asked me to do. I do know who asked me to do this. It was probably a group conscious decision, and it was Carolina. So we can take it up with her, or get involved in ODAAT. Join the group conscience. Have your say. All right. So it says we gave up our positions and off we roared on a motorcycle. Now this, if you're caring about the timeline, I'm going to continue to point out the timeline just because it's genuinely, yeah, Rob's got it. It's genuinely like really helpful to sort of put things into context. So when they quit their jobs and off they go on the motorcycle, it's April 1925. And if you are somebody who is a motorcycle aficionado, I looked into it and I believe that it was a Harley Davidson. So that's what I got the Rob seal of approval. Woo! And it says motorcycles, the sidecar stuffed with tent, blankets, a change of clothes, and 3 huge volumes of a financial reference service. So Bill Wilson, he has this idea. Why don't we physically go to these companies and investigate them? And the 3 volumes of a financial reference service, that would be like almost like the Yellow Pages, but like addresses. Like, where could you find these companies? So get their names, get their addresses. And that's what they were going to do, was explore. We're going to read the Eastern Seaboard and explore these companies and investigate them. And listen, I read this a certain way for a long time. Now, the certain way that I read this was poor Lois. Oh, gosh. Bill Wilson, he's on a grand adventure. He's stuffing his wife in the sidecar. He's like, off we go. But here's the deal. Lois loved it. She loved it. She wasn't this like, oh, poor me little, Al-Anon. She was like a kicking butt, taking names sort of, yeah. There's this story where Lois, in her later years, when she would speak at an Al-Anon conference, if there was ever a motorcycle that was there, which is more common to see at an AA conference, but she would want to get on it and have her picture taken, and she loved it. And it's the best. And she wrote, I'll say it's a book, but she wrote this. You can find it online. It's The Diary of Two Motorcycle Hobos, and you can kind of read. Yeah, it's there. He literally just put it in. Rob is on it. So if you want to like read it, like their adventures and it was, she loved it. So it's not a poor Lois, but that's what they were doing. And it says our friends thought a lunacy commission should be appointed. Lunacy Commission. Hey, that would be a really great name for a big book study that happens Friday nights, 1 a.m. in the UK, 8 p.m. Eastern with me and my friend Terry. Pew pew. Little plug. It's like in a movie when they say the title of the name of the movie in the movie. I just think it's funny. And so Lunacy Commission would be like, man, our friends thought we were crazy. Our friends thought we had to have like an intervention and get tossed into a padded room. That's what it was saying. And it says, perhaps they were right. I had some success at speculation, so we had a little money. But we once worked on a farm for a month to avoid drawing on our small capital. This is how I know that Rob is my people. Because I remember doing a big book study where I would talk about some of these fun facts and some of the information behind the scenes. And that person I did it with would get angry at me. And to which I'm gonna tell you the fun fact. Rob's got it in the chat. So this farm was the Goldfoot Dairy Farm in Scotia, New York. And they worked there for like a month, and they were both paid $75. Yeah, all the info's in there. It's like they were both paid $75. Now, here's the thing. He had a son that worked for General Electric. Now, when I have been teased or given a hard time about like my fun facts, I have then decided, and the cow's name was Bessie, and she was the best. And that's not true, but like, yeah, it is in my heart. It's my own little Bill Wilson headcanon. I can have that. It's fine. But what happened is that allowed him to get into General Electric and to make connections. And so when we talk about Bill Wilson's weapon that he is using to prove to the world that he is important, it is drink, and it is working on Wall Street. And at this time, drink is working for him. It's working for him because he's going to go and be social and make connections. And in World War II, they had a slogan that was loose lips sink ships. Well, you get drinking with some people and those loose lips will share the stories. And that's how he was doing it. So at this time, alcohol was working for him. And that's why he couldn't just try to Purolator the reports. You know what I mean? He had to actually go there because you couldn't just like walk in and be like, hey, you don't know me. Can I see what's going on? They'd be like, security, you know. He actually had to go and invest and investigate. So And it goes on to say, that was the last honest manual labor on my part for many a day. We covered the whole eastern United States in a year. At the end of it, my reports to Wall Street procured me a position there. So this idea that he had, that his friends were like, that is the stupidest thing we have ever heard, Bill. Are you out of your mind? It was a genius idea. He goes back to Wall Street. He gets a job on Wall Street. And, the use of a large expense account. SpaghettiOs, which is the technical term, because if you're like me, you know that we are not people who should have expense accounts. This is not going to go well for Bill. It goes on to say the exercise of an option brought in more money, leaving us with a profit of several $1,000s for that year. And I want to point something out. He had initially invested $1,000. And his profit was between, let's say, several thousand, right? Between $2,000 and $3,000. So essentially, he doubled or tripled his investment. So again, I just want to emphasize, Bill Wilson is not a dummy. He's a very smart. I mean, I think he's a smarty pants. I was going to say genius. I don't think a screw is loose. Well, we'll talk about the screw that is loose. It's the obsession of the mind. But he's got this thing. And it says, for the next few years, fortune threw money and applause my way. And that is a line that has sort of grown in meaning for me. I know a lot of people really read Bill's story with a lot of ego. Like Bill Wilson, he's an egomaniac. I don't read it that way anymore. I really read it as a human being who has suffered from a terrible sense of inferiority. And I know some of the behind the scenes that he felt so unworthy most of his life. And I just point that out to say, it says for the next few years, fortune threw money and applause my way. Luck, that ability to say, it wasn't that I was the genius, I was the smarty pants. And just for the nerds, and you can have your own experience with this, but the 12 steps were borrowed from Oxford Group principles and Oxford Group ideals. And there's a book called I Was a Pagan by V.C. Kitchen. You don't have to read it. There's actually some stuff in there that, in modern times, is a little bit difficult to read. But he is a guy, when I read it, I'm like, oh, that's the ego. And he's like, I am the genius, V.C. Kitchen. And he's very tongue-in-cheek, but you can kind of see the ego. And and he was a gentleman that got sober and through the Oxford Group. So just a book recommendation, but keep in mind, my book recommendations are not easy summer reading. It's you want a lovely book to lounge on the sun chair? Well, get yourself a copy of Varieties of Religious Experience. Woo! I don't know what's wrong. Well, I do know there's a lot wrong with me, and I do have a great picture of that, because listen, I have taken a lot of inventory, and I needed to. So for the next few years, fortune threw money and applause my way. I had arrived. And I want us to emphasize that I had arrived, because we are going to see how quickly that falls apart. But this is Bill Wilson's pinnacle. This is the highlight of his his professional and personal life. He had arrived. He has made it. And I want to point something out. There's a surfeit not only of finances, he's getting in the money, but there's a surfeit of approval, of recognition, of validation. It's all coming together to try to fill that hole in the depth of his soul. Now, that hole in the depth of his soul does not make him an alcoholic, but I want to point to that is what we treat in Alcoholics Anonymous. And again, to talk about that overwhelming number of approval, validation, all that stuff. Here's what we've got. It says, my judgment and ideas were followed by many to the tune of paper millions. So they didn't have the cash, but it was in the stocks, and he was not a dumb guy, and people are like, Bill, and he's getting all the approval, and it's that warm glow of validation that leaves us feeling more hollow after. Maybe that's just me, though. You can let me know if you don't relate. It goes on to say the great boom of the late 20s was seething and swelling. So this was an economic well, boom. There was money and opportunity, and it was a time of great opulence. So think as we're moving into some of that like Art Deco, Art Nouveau style, the flapper dresses, and we're going to read about the jazz places, like the Great Gatsby, if you were forced to read that in high school and none of it made sense at the time, me. Or like the time, it's like money, champagne, it's exciting, it feels like, and the 20s really felt like they were living in the future. Keep in mind, in Bill Wilson's lifetime, like electricity wasn't common. Planes didn't exist when he was born. To go from that to like, we're jet setting, we've got radio. It was like a revolution. We're in the future. It's the post-war era. Woo! It's great. And so I'm just trying to get us catch that vibe. You know what I'm saying? Catch the vibe, which is the clinical term, catching the vibe. Oh, I'm so sorry. All right. It says drink was taking an important and exhilarating part of my life. I want us to make a note of that. Drink was taking an important and exhilarating part of my life. Now, we're not seeing consequences, but it points to the sense of ease and comfort, the sense of relief that he is getting from alcohol. And if you were to ask a non-alcoholic, what is important to you? You know what they're not going to say? Alcohol. They're not going to say alcohol. They're going to say family. They're maybe going to say career. They maybe have passions. Maybe they have morals, can't relate, values, things like causes that they feel called to. That is what is important to them. Now, let's be real. If you were active in your drinking and somebody gave you a survey of what's important to you, you might not have written down alcohol. But is our proportion, our relationship with alcohol, does that tell you that is what I've put first in my life, even though I didn't want to? Now, I'll go on to say, what is exhilarating? And there are people who find certain things, like going on adventures, traveling, skydiving, starting a business, falling in love. That is exhilarating. Most normal people are not going to tell you that 3 shots of gin is exhilarating, So he's got a relationship with alcohol that's a little bit different than other people. But if we're starting to relate to that, it's helpful, right? It's helpful to see that my relationship with alcohol is a little bit different. It says there was loud talk in the jazz places uptown. So flapper dresses, the short hair, the woo, they're just all having a great time. And it says, everyone spent in thousands and chattered in millions. So the vibe, it's exciting, economic, it's wonderful, woo! Scoffers could scoff and be damned. So anyone that was like, ugh, you guys, it's not going to last. Ugh, it's a bubble. Ugh, it's not, He's like, well, to damn with you. I'm not listening to that. Good times, baby. And then it says, I made a host of fair weather friends. Now, this is a line many of us can relate to. A fair weather friend is a friend that is only there in the good times. And I think many of us are like, yeah, I had a host of fair weather friends when the booze was gone, the money was gone, they were gone too. It takes a little bit of inventory for me to see that I also was a fair weather friend. Sorry to ruin your day. Just throwing that out there. It goes on. My drinking assumed more serious proportions, continuing all day and almost every night. And I want us, if we're writing in our book today, to make a note that is a sign of the physical allergy. He's got this phenomenon of craving. Because if his drinking is going to that place where it's continuing all day and almost every night, it is a sign that he does not have the ability to control the amount that he drinks. Goes on, the remonstrances of my friends terminated in a row, and I became a lone wolf. Now that is a line that I was like, what? I don't know what to remonstrance and what is to row. Now I know you guys in the UK, you guys use row, and I know I pronounced it wrong when I said row. That was part of the humor. I don't want to offend you. Don't let me call it soccer. But for our North Americans, we're like, girl, I have no idea what happened to Bill. So basically the remonstrances, it's Bill Wilson's friends that are showing up and saying, Bill, I'm worried about you. I'm concerned about your drinking. Bill, you can't show up like that. Bill, come on. It's a Tuesday. Why are you drinking at work? Like that, the concern, the opposition, the disapproval, the like, Bill, what's going on? And so his friend's concern terminated with a row. Now, a row is a fight. Now, I'm not saying he punched him, but he told them where to go and where to put it and all of that. F you, F that, and he became a lone wolf. He began to isolate. Can I relate to that? Can I relate to people in my life concerned about my drinking, and I tell them where to go, and I begin to withdraw? I begin to lose friends. I begin to lose connections. Does that sound familiar? It says, there were many unhappy scenes in our sumptuous apartment. There had been, no real infidelity. For loyalty to my wife, helped at times by extreme drunkenness, kept me out of those scrapes. Now, that was a line. Listen, I did not relate to Bill at the beginning when I first read this. I'm like, oh, he's gross. I don't like him. And I know what this line means. You know what this line means? That means he was going to cheat on her, but he was too drunk to keep it standing at attention. That's what that means. And I'm trying to say it politely. I'm sure we get a euphemism. That's what that means. And what a stupid, smelly jerk. I don't like him. But here's one of the things that I know to be true is that Bill Wilson deeply, deeply loved Lois. And is my experience that my drinking has allowed me to cross sexual boundaries that I would never cross when I was sober, to do certain things that I would never, ever do when I was sober. Can I relate to that? Oh man, stop turning it on me. I want to have a look in there. Yeah, I relate to that. All right. In 1929, I contracted Gulf fever. Now, Gulf fever was about as serious as tuberculosis. I'm just kidding. He just got excited about golf. That's what that means. He was like, woo, golf. And actually, last week, we spoke about when he was a kid, he had that obsession with boomerangs. Now he gets obsessed with golf. That, again, being obsessed with things, that does not make us alcoholic. But it helps us to humanize Bill and to see ourselves in Bill. Anyone here ever have a hyperfixation? It wouldn't be golf for me, but do we have a hyperfixation? And it says, so he contracted Gulf fever. He's excited. We went at once to the country, my wife to applaud. Well, I started out to overtake Walter Hagen. Now, I will point out, as a North American, by nature, I'm like, I have no idea what this is, golf. I've got a lot of golfers in my family. Like, almost everybody in my family just loves golf. It's not my jam. It's not for me. Maybe I think I'd like the idea of a golf cart and some quiet. But yeah, I'm not a golfer. But and I will say, every time I ever, y'all in Scotland, y'all know who Walter Hagen is. You guys are on it. But Walter Hagen, we can equate it to Tiger Woods. One of, if not the best golfers of all time. He won 11 majors, and as Rob put in the chat, he was like the Babe Ruth to baseball, or the, if I say a football star, by which I mean soccer, that's going to be contentious, so I won't talk about that, but maybe like a Michael Jordan or a LeBron James, that sport, see what I'm doing there? A Wayne Gretzky for the hockey, see, yeah. Yeah. So that's what we're talking about. Oh, don't worry. I can lower that if you want. I got you. Hold on. There we go. It's all good. I saw that moment of like, I didn't mean to do that. Oh no, nobody's looking at you. Not me either. It's all good. Alrighty. But what are we taking from this? Bill Wilson, he starts to golf. And he has that experience of like, all right, I gotta be better than the best. You know what I mean? I have gotta, anyone here have that little bit of that black and white, all or nothing thinking, I can't, listen, if I'm not gonna be a Serena Williams or a Venus Williams, I'm not picking up a tennis racket, or I'm not trying pickleball. Like, I gotta be the best at it. And again, this does not make him alcoholic, but it humanizes him, and it helps us maybe see ourselves in him. And so he's going to be better than Walter. But liquor caught up with me much faster than I came up behind Walter. So the allergy is kicking in for him. And the consequences are starting to pile up. Now, we're going to talk about the allergy here in a bit. I began to be jittery in the morning. Now, that morning jitters is very likely those early signs of alcohol withdrawal. And it is very likely a sign that he has the physical allergy. Because people who have the ability to control the amount they drink do not drink themselves into a jittery hangover. So again, I just want to point that out. Golf permitted. And see, I wasn't functional enough to golf when I was drinking. That's also part of it. Golf permitting, drinking every day and every night. What a convenient hobby. Anyone relate to that? That idea of the only hobbies or activities that I am doing are ones that I can really drink at. And I'm not really focused on the hobby. I can let my curling team down just as long as I get another drink. Yeah, curling. Yeah. Sorry, apparently I'm here for the Canadians. It's curling, or for those in Ireland, the hurling, curling or hurling. Yeah, see what I did there? I am so sorry. Alrighty. Every day and every night. So he has that ability to continue to drink. Can I relate to that? I'm taking actions and doing things that allow me to drink. It says it was fun to carom around the exclusive course which had inspired such awe in me as a lad. Now, I'll tell you this story. There's a gentleman, same person, that does not find my fun facts interesting. And it was after a meeting. This person was, chatting, and I was there, and he's like, why do we even need to know any of that? Like, who even cares what, golf course he was a member of? And I have a thing that doesn't always read social cues. So without missing a beat, out of my face comes the Equinox Country Club in Manchester, Vermont. No filter, none. So it is the Equinox Country Club in Manchester, Vermont, and it still exists today. And I point that out if you want to go. It's also not spelled how you would expect it. It's like EKW. O-N or A-N-O-K. Like, it's not like you'd expect, because it's fancy, like a Q and a U and an I and an X, like equinox. But it's like equinox. So that's the golf course, which had the exclusive course, which had inspired such awe in me as a lad. And here's the thing. Golf is far more open today, but in the 1920s, in the 1930s, golf was very much an exclusive activity. It was a rich, white man's sport. And if you were not those things, you were not likely to be doing that activity. And I'm just pointing to that because this is another area where he's proving his importance. Look at me. I'm just this kid from Vermont, and look, I'm on the exclusive course. And when it says, I had acquired the impeccable coat of tan one sees upon the well-to-do, that coat of tan to me feels like a suit of armor. You could kind of tell who was wealthy because they had the money to summer places, to get the tan, to be on the golf course. And so it's like it's his suit of armor, because at the core of his being, who he is not enough, and he doesn't feel like he's important. The local banker watched me whirl fat checks in and out of his till with amused skepticism. So Bill Wilson, he's not doing a lot with the financial plannings. These fat checks, which heavy checks, going in, going out, going in, going out, going in, out. And the banker's like, buddy, this is not going to last. Bill's not going to hear it. And so here's where the world takes a change. It says, abruptly, in October 1929, hell broke loose on the New York Stock Exchange. Now, this is what I believe was called Bloody Monday. And this was the stock market crash. Yeah, you got it. This was the stock market crash that plunged the United States and later the world into the Great Depression. I'm going to point something out. Bill Wilson, all of his finances are tied into the stock market, but also his sense of worth and identity and value is wrapped up in this thing, and it's all gone bust in an instant. After one of those days of inferno, that's like one of those days of hell, I wobbled from a hotel bar to a brokerage office. It was 8 o'clock, 5 hours after the market had closed. I'm going to point something out. That idea, like this, that was a line that like I would read over, blah, 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 whatever. But there is a lot of very important information that is telling us where Bill is in relation to his alcoholism at this time. So after one of those days of inferno, this is a day of hell. He is wobbling. And I'm going to point something out. In my experience, there are two people that wobble. Penguins and drunks. And he's not a penguin. He is wobbling. And that is a sign that he has the allergy. You know when you have too much to drink and for some reason the earth starts moving? Some of y'all know the spinning bed. It's like, oh, things are happening. It's not me though. It's just a localized earthquake. It's fine. But so he's got the wobble going. And he wobbles from a hotel bar to a brokerage office. So, he was drinking at that hotel bar. But it says it was 8 o'clock, 5 hours after the market had closed. Why is he showing up to work 5 hours after, the market's closed? Nothing more is happening. It's the day is done. You can't do midnight trades or anything like that. Why is he showing up to work 5 hours after? Now, here's my sneaking suspicion, and you can let me know if this sounds familiar to you. It was a stressful time. And so when him and some of his colleagues were going out, they were like, let's have a drink at lunch, just something to relax, take the edge off. And what would happen is each and every one of his colleagues had one beer or one drink at lunch and went back to work. Bill Wilson took that first drink, and we know what happened. The drink took him. It set off the allergy. It set off that phenomenon of craving, and he took a drink, and he needed another, and he needed another, and he needed another, and he could not stop. And so he missed the entire afternoon of work and had to go back to be like, wait, what happened? What happened there? He's got, what was going on? He's wobbling. If he's wobbling, he's got the one eye going. We know that. The wobble, the one eye, it's classic. And so the ticker still clattered. And Rob put a picture of the ticker in the chat. Now, in modern times, you could turn on any business channel. I really wouldn't watch those. I'm not a money person. I'm like numbers, woo. I used to be a math tutor. That should scare you. I also budget based on vibes, which is not how you're supposed to do it. When you file your taxes, the government does not want to hear vibes. They would like numbers, please. But so when you see those, the financial, goes at the bottom of the screen, all these companies on the NASDAQ are going to have, nowadays it's a 4 or 5 letter identification. Back then it was 3. And so the ticker's still clattered. So he's basically turning on the news and having a look at what's happening at the bottom, checking or a stocks app, that sort of thing. But it's a physical ticker where the stock names of the companies and the numbers are being printed off. I was staring at an inch of tape which bore the inscription XYZ -32. It had been 52 that morning. And XYZ is a placeholder for an anonymous company. The company was Pennick & Ford, so it was really PFK, not XYZ, but that was the company. And from what I've looked into, it did a lot of jars and that sort of thing. And so at the start of the morning, if that company's stock was 52, and then it was down, it was -32. And so basically it was down, imagine you had invested $1 in Pennick & Ford. You'd have $52. And then it's down, it's done. It's done. It's gone. And it was a lot more than $1. So it had been 52 that morning. I was finished. And so were many friends. The papers reported men jumping to death from the towers of high finance, capital H, capital F. And that's something I like to point out. When there's capitalizations, now not in this case, but when there's capitalizations, there's synonyms for words that we could use for God or a higher power. Now, in this case, it's just the sort of like literary convention when referencing high finance. But I think there's like a subtlety with it, because high finance, the stock market, that was Bill Wilson's life, his sense of worth, his value, his God. And so the papers reported men jumping to death from the tires of high finance. So when the stock market crashed, there were reports of friends, colleagues that would be jumping out of the windows, jumping out of these tall stock market buildings and committing suicide in that way. Now, there was a lot of suicide for people who were in that industry at that time. But to be fair, the papers were a little over-reporting. They were kind of sensationalizing what had happened. But again, what matters is what Bill Wilson reads. Wilson is reading this story. And what he's hearing is like that men are jumping to death. Men just like him are dying as the result of this financial crisis. Now, I'll point something out. This financial crisis did not happen to Bill. It happened to every single person who worked in Wall Street. And then the effects happened to every single person in the United States and then spread around the world. That is important, because often we'll read, well, you know, if he was in stocks and that happened, I'd have to get drunk too. But it happened to everyone. And he had colleagues. And actually, I live in a part of Canada that's known as Alberta. And Alberta is it's an oil and gas based economy. So the economy in the place that I live is based on how is the price of oil. And there are times where we had the roaring 20s. And it was in the early 2000s. And then there was a big bust. And man, people were getting fired left and right. And you would see people get fired and like massive layoffs in the oil and gas sector. And then in like some of the luxury sectors, I had a friend who worked in jewelry and she got laid off. And we saw this like effect. Now, I use this as an example because I saw a similar thing where people what would they do? Well, they would update their resume. They would try to see if they could find jobs in other fields. They were really proactive. There were alcoholics and they were getting drunk, but that was not everybody's reaction to the same situation that affected everyone. So I just wanted to make a note of that. So Bill Wilson hears a suicide. And his response to suicide, and this is important, it's that disgusted me. I would not jump. We're going to see Bill Wilson's personal relationship to suicide change as we continue on. I would not jump. I went back to the bar. And what that is telling us is that Bill Wilson is still finding a solution in alcohol. Alcohol is still working for him. He doesn't need to consider suicide. He's got an answer. It's drinking. So he goes back to the bar. And I'm going to read this how I hear this. My friends had dropped several million since 10 o'clock. So what? So what? You can almost hear it, right? Like he's a couple deep. So what? You know, like he's got the glow. He's got the buzz. He's good. Who cares? There's no problems. Woo, we're good, right? It's working for him. Tomorrow was another day. As I drank, that old fierce determination to win came back. And again, that fierce determination to win, it's driven by inferiority. But what we're seeing is that he is getting that sense of ease and comfort from the first drink. So it's working for him. It's a solution for him. And again, to point out that the stock market crash, it didn't just happen to Bill, it happened to everyone. But Bill had a very specific response to it. It says, the next morning, I telephoned a friend in Montreal. He had plenty of money left and thought I had better go to Canada. Which is a great plan, because there's no alcoholics in Canada. For the geography, I'm Canadian. Also, so is Rob. Just throwing that out there. We got some Canucks that are drunks. And this was 1930. And actually, unfortunately, I'm going to give you this piece of information about who his friend is. And I promise you, you don't even have to write it down. I'm going to tell this to you and you are going to remember forever. His friend was named Dick Johnson. That was his friend. Write it down if you want, but I promise you don't need to. And the company was Green Shields & Co. And it says, by the following spring, we were living in our accustomed style. So financially, things are back on track. I felt like Napoleon returning from Elba. No St. Helena for me. And so, oh yes, absolutely. So what he's doing is he's referencing Napoleon Bonaparte. And I happen to have a little Napoleon little notebook. And so this is Napoleon, if you don't know who he is. And I love how normally I'm like, oh, let's put it in the chat, picture in the chat. I'll do a share screen. I'm like, nah, I just got a notebook. You got to look. There's something about how my brain works that way. So Napoleon. And what is interesting about Napoleon, there's a deep metaphor here. Whether Bill meant it or not, I'm leaning into the metaphor. So before Napoleon, France had a series of kings and rulers. And the belief at that time was that the lineage of kings and rulers was ordained by God. It was an ordained by God bloodline. I'm not saying I agree with this. I'm just saying here's the sort of the lore. When the lore is real, it's just called history. Just doing a little lore drop. And so when a new king was crowned, oftentimes the Pope would be there to say, yep, God says this is a good idea. And the Pope would crown the King of France, and everyone would be like, yep, we're good, and we're not going to disagree because not off with our heads. That happens later. And then, so when Napoleon rose to power, he was outside of that bloodline, and he came to power. And there was this famous painting of Napoleon's coronation, him becoming not king, but emperor of France. And he's got a golden laurel wreath. Napoleon just loved ancient Rome. And he's like, yeah, I don't want to be a king. I want to be an emperor. I don't need a crown. I need a wreath of laurels. Like that was his vibe. And so Napoleon, he takes, instead of like being offered it from the Pope, he takes it and puts it on his own head. And it's this beautiful, beautiful ornate painting of him doing that. And I will let you know, what the heck does that have to do with alcoholism? Well, Bill Wilson, he might not have had the, I am the emperor of France, but was not Bill Wilson the emperor of his own life, the supreme ruler of his life and what he needed to do, and thought he knew what was best? And even though I cannot relate to being Queen Page or Empress Page, I do relate to me thinking I knew what was best in my life, despite all the mounting evidence that was not the case. And so what happened is Napoleon, he had a bit of an oopsie doodles. And so for the history nerds, the technical term for oopsie doopsies or oopsie doodles is an invasion of Russia in the winter. Whoopsies. And that never goes well. And so he had one of those whoops. And they were like, after that happened, they were like, get out of here, Napoleon. We are going to exile. We're going to kick you out to this like Mediterranean island, I believe it's called Elba. And so Bill Wilson, when the stock market crashed, he was no longer the emperor of his life. It felt as though he had been exiled to this place called Elba. And this exiled to this place of no importance, and he's not making money, and he's lost everything. But Napoleon was like, nah, son, I ain't staying here. I do what I want. Army, let's go. Woohoo, back to France. And Napoleon was like, emperor again. I am so sorry if this is how you're learning the history. Like, run it by some sources. At least take it to Wikipedia. But Napoleon's like, I'm back, baby. Guess who's back? Woo! Napoleon's back. Back again. Tell a friend. Woohoo! And that's what Bill Wilson feels like in Canada. He is like, I am the emperor again. The money's here. The money's there. I'm not going to be exiled. Well, what happened to Napoleon is they were like, hey, Napoleon, Not cool. We're going to exile you again. Off to St. Helena, this tiny island in the Atlantic Ocean, like middle of nowhere. And that's where Napoleon lived until he passed away. And Bill Wilson's like, no St. Helena for me. I'm king of the hill. Woohoo! But it says, but drinking caught up with me again. Not the stock market, not the economy, but drinking caught up with me again. And again, that is a sign that he has the allergy of the body. That is a sign that he does not have the ability to control the amount that he takes once he starts to drink. Because he says, and my generous friend had to let me go. So he drank his way out of the job. Has that ever happened to me? Has the lack of the ability to control the amount that I drink once I start caused me to lose jobs or opportunities or get kicked out of school or lose things that were important to me? Did I lose those things because I could not control the amount that I drank? And it says, this time we stayed broke. And so that is going to be some foreshadowing. Again, I had arrived page 3. Page 4, suicide? Ugh, that disgusts me. But he's going to then have a period of difficult financial struggles. And actually, I mean, this is going to give Peppa a whole 5 minutes. And I'd love to take credit for being so generous, but I just know I won't get through the next paragraph in like a minute or two. So over to you, Peppa. Thanks for having me share.